Hello, and welcome to Presenting, a podcast where we talk about various topics related to role-playing games, typically Paizo products such as Pathfinder or Starfinder, but also others. I'm John Godek, and with me today is Isis Wozniakowska. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, hello.
Hey,
Happy to be
thanks so
here.
much for joining us. I've been trying, I think for months, to get you on this podcast.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
No, well, you were busy. You said you had to
I've had
move, and
I just
yeah,
moved this month and
yeah.
it's been a bit of a crazy couple of months. I started grad school, that was a part of it too. So
Oh, what are you studying?
I went to San Francisco State for comparative literature,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm actually trying to go back and basically further my comp lit studies, and we'll see how that goes. So far, I
Nice,
mean, it's been
nice.
okay, but I've only been taking one class so far. So
No, I actually came here right from teaching a class.
oh wow,
So
there you
that's it.
go.
I'm a university professor. So it's when anybody talks about school, I get excited.
Oh well, that's
So,
good.
well, I shouldn't say teaching. I had a guest speaker, so I actually
Okay.
listened. Yeah, I try to do that as much as I can. I've been teaching 20 years, and I'd rather listen to other people if I can. So,
I mean, you can only say the same thing so many times, right?
well, that's what I tell my students, and they appreciate that now. So, Isis is a tabletop freelance author and game designer. She's contributed to The Secrets of Magic and Dark Archive hardcovers for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, as well as the Tales of Lost Omens vignettes that are on the Paizo blog. Very cool.
Mhm.
On the Starfinder side, she has worked on the Interstellar Species hardcover, back matter for Horizons of the Vast AP Book 6, and was the author of Starfinder Scenario 504, Fragment of the Fourth, which I have actually played.
Oh wow, you got to play
Yeah,
it. That's
yeah.
good. What'd you think of it?
It was fun. It was
All
fun.
right, good.
Um, I'm fortunate we have a really good GM up here, Jocelyn Hamilton,
Oh,
and she just
nice.
makes it so I GM a lot. And when I don't
Mhm.
GM, I always try to get her to GM because she just makes it so much fun. So it
Well,
was
that's
good.
good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I don't get to hear a whole lot about it because the higher level stuff just doesn't get played as much.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
it's good to hear that
Well,
you guys enjoyed it.
yes, and we're itching for as much high level stuff as we can get.
Hmm.
We've been playing a long time,
Yeah.
I have all these level 13s and 14s and anything I can get anywhere, I'll play.
Yeah.
Um, so
We have a
ISIS, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, we have a pretty like regular play around here as
Hmm.
well. So I mean, part of the reason I'm even like able to write up that high is because we have plenty of high level
Yes.
characters up here. So
Right. Are Kate and Dennis in your regular group then?
yeah, they're in
Yeah.
the area.
Hmm. Yeah. I've seen some Warhorns, I think, for your group online, and just
Hmm.
scheduling wise, I'm kind of I've signed up off and on, but
Yeah.
I'm just so booked that
Yeah.
it's hard to get too many games in anymore. So
I mean, that's pretty much like that and my weekend home game are like the only thing I can do right now. So,
oh, see, I'm in 3 home games.
oh my
One of them that
gosh.
is every week, and the other 2 are bi-weekly, and then we have our lodge games,
Oh,
and so
nice.
trying to fit it in around podcast recording and podcast
Yep.
editing, and
Yep.
oh, and then I have to teach once in a while and grade paper.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes you have
yeah,
to do the day job or
life,
whatever.
and then if I have to do any writing on top of that,
Mhm.
so.
Mhm.
But Isis, this is about you. Can,
All right. All right.
can you talk a little bit about your journey to becoming a freelance author and game designer?
I don't even know if I have the most like exciting journey. For the most part, I actually started just around the time COVID happened.
Hmm.
Um but I guess like I've been writing since I was very young. I had a third grade teacher who made us write she made us write journals every day or every other day. And I was just always grumpy about it. I never knew what to write. I never wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But she always got on my case about it. So I just started writing like sh- sort of odd little fictions involving myself and my friends, and then it just like kept going from there. So I've just kind of been writing for myself for a very long time. And unlike a lot of other people who get into doing Paizo writing, I didn't have a lot of tabletop work that I had done before, but like I said, I've been writing for years. I've taken a lot of creative writing classes. It's, I've tried to hone that craft, even if it was just for myself. So when I got into doing tabletop, which was 2015, 2016, something like that. I was enjoying that, and then I had to stop for a while because college got too crazy. And then I came back around, was it 4 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that. Started doing Starfinder, picked up Pathfinder 2 when it started up again. And it was around the time COVID started that they had an open call, which I basically responded to. I sent them in some short story work that I had done and, some world building for a webcomic that I wrote with a friend of mine in high school. And apparently that was enough to get them to give me a chance. And the first project I got to work on with Paizo was Secrets of Magic. And I'm very proud of what I put in for that. So, it's sort of a weird journey of a technically short story writer, but I didn't have anything published. So, well, that's not necessarily true. I actually did do some review writing. I did a study abroad program briefly, and there was an online tourist magazine that basically compensated you by getting you into events for free, and then you would just write a review of the event. So I was like, fun. I'll go to a bunch of events. Sure, I can write 250 words about it. So
wow. And so that was, how long was your study abroad, first of all?
That was a year. It was from I think it was the 2016, 2017 school year.
Well, and you were in Florence for that, or did you travel?
Florence, Italy, yeah.
Wow. It's funny, that same year? No, the year before, we had an exchange student from Pisa at our house for the year.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. And then my daughter the year after, which would have been 2016, went there to, there goes my dog, went there to visit their family and stuff. And so that's kind of, I love Italy. How did you like Italy?
Oh, Italy was great. It's a fantastic place. I mean, it was really funny too because, I had studied a lot of Italian before I got there. One of the things with comparative literature that is really hard for a lot of people to get into is you have to study at least one other language than your native language.
Right.
To the point where you can read in it. So I had studied quite a bit of it, which meant I did a lot of traveling within Italy because the thing people don't realize about Italians is outside of tourist hubs, they don't speak English really.
Right.
So I had a great time. I went around to all these small towns, I went to Assisi, I went to Arezzo, and it was gorgeous. And in fact, sometimes some of the smaller places because you can get everywhere with the regional trains, but sometimes some of the smaller places were even, I almost want to argue, prettier or more exciting. Not that Florence isn't exciting. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a great city. I love it. But it'll always be my second home,
And do you speak Italian pretty well then?
Pretty well. I mean, I haven't used it in, 2-3 years. But I mean, I got to the point where when I was briefly doing some work in a museum, I interned there so I could stay for the summer. I got to the point where the guards thought so I always tell people the greatest compliment I've ever gotten on my Italian was a museum guard who told me, wow, you're always speaking English up to these tourists. You speak English really well. because she apparently had not realized I was
Yeah.
American, because I was only ever talking to the guards in Italian. So
Wow. Wow. Very cool.
so that was I always say that was my favorite thing that I'd ever heard about my Italian.
And so you also have a minor in European history. Was that part of your study abroad?
No, well, so I took European studies. It's sort of it technically wasn't part of study abroad, although most of the classes I took in study abroad counted for it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost an international relations minor, but like
Oh
not
wow.
quite, because we
Mm-hmm.
don't. San Francisco State didn't officially have an international relations minor,
Right.
so we had like global studies, and if you took it
Mm-hmm.
as the minor, you picked whatever
Mm-hmm.
continent or whatever you were picking. So
Some part of the
yeah,
globe. Yeah.
yeah, some part of the globe. So I had a European studies minor.
Cool. And so how did your comparative literature and your kind of study of Europe kind of enhance your freelance writing?
Well, I mean, I'd certainly say, especially for the sake of like fantasy
Mm-hmm.
writing and world building, it's been really fruitful to like have experienced a lot of other places. I mean, and I let's be honest, like Galarian is a little like
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of like European analogs
Right.
that are definitely more approachable if you have a little more background in the European history and philosophy and all that crazy stuff. But the other thing is, I hate to say that I hate to say this because it always people always say this, but it's very true. It's like as a literature major, I read a lot, and reading a lot is very useful if you want to be a
Yes.
writer, as it turns
Yes.
out. So, um, I read a large variety of things and maybe have to overanalyze it a little more than the average person,
Mm.
but it gives me kind of an idea of what typical tropes are, and
Right.
the kinds of things that the kinds of things that work, the kinds of things that don't. So I definitely think that in some ways that is like helped me a lot as a writer.
So I'm now kind of wondering the type of literature you read, and I only do this because Jason Tondro has a PhD in English literature.
Yeah.
Focus was on kind of comic books and
Hmm.
Arthurian literature and kind of comparing them and tying them together. Are you doing something cool like that, or
Well, so my focus in undergrad was technically pre 1800s European literature, so
okay?
pre modern.
Yeah.
Um, I had done a lot of Renaissance and medieval. Part of that was just because my study abroad. Turns out, if you study in Italy, you learn a lot about the Renaissance and the medieval
Yes.
era.
Yes.
So that was sort of their thing, right? But yeah, so my current, we'll say, goal, I don't know if it's overly ambitious or not, but part of the reason I went back to grad school is comparative literature is particularly good at kind of front like being the forefront of new types of literature study and new types
Mm.
of literary
Hmm.
fields. So as a tabletop writer, I've actually been talking with my advisors in sort of such of a way as to overall you know um the eventual study would be trying to get a comparison of work between like tabletop as a literary medium
Oh
and
wow.
um like kind of early modern kind of oral storytelling,
Mm.
and things like various like old styles of poetry, like where people would add on
Hmm.
to each other's poetry and make like full-fledged stories. It's still in the works, but we'll see how it goes.
No, that sounds like a lot of fun. Wow.
Yeah.
To be able to combine those, I think that would be great.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of the things we talk about a lot in comparative literature is like
Hmm.
what constitutes as literature,
Hmm.
and it's an ongoing question in the field. So,
No, no, very cool, very cool. So you said you started writing initially for Pathfinder Second Edition hardcovers, and
mhm,
now you have a recent Starfinder scenario out, plus some work on an AP and stuff.
mhm.
So first of all, how do you get one and then go to the other? Because if you're specializing one, it seems odd that all of a sudden they have you do that. Um, but also, kind of, what are some of the challenges working between the two systems as well?
It's a good question. So, what's actually funny about this is, my first job was on Secrets of Magic,
Hmm.
but I would technically consider myself a Starfinder author more than a Pathfinder author. And part of that is just, I'm a little more engrossed in Starfinder lore than I am in Pathfinder. But um, that said, I like both systems a
Hmm.
lot. And the open call that I responded to was for Pathfinder. And so,
Right.
but the main thing is like, once I got started, it was more or less just kind of looking out for people who had things available, and because I'm know both systems, it's a
Hmm.
little bit, a wider range of things that I could try for. um but yeah, no, there are definitely some complications between the two. I definitely am more used to writing in Starfinder, so one of the issues I sometimes run into is I'm still kind of working on encounter design in Pathfinder 2. I mean, like my big thing is like I haven't done like a homebrew adventure in PF2. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
GM'd it a lot,
Right.
but it's always been pre-written stuff. So every time I have to like go build an encounter, I have to like go flip through all the books and be like, oh
Hmm.
gosh, what am I doing? That and remembering how all the conditions work,
Right.
because
Right.
oh boy, they all have the same name and all function differently in each edition. So that's fun. Um, I thankfully haven't goofed up on uh naming skills the wrong thing yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I have seen that before, calling a society check a culture check and vice
Right.
versa.
Right. Right. Right.
But so I keep a heavy eye out for that one because I'm like, oh god, I don't want to make that mistake.
What about like the context? Shifting from one to the other.
Oh
So
yeah.
seems like that. I mean, clearly the type of things you can do are different. Maybe
Yeah.
the themes or the what you're trying to accomplish can have a general same analog one way back and forth, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely the context is a lot different.
Yeah, and one thing that's a little bit frustrating with Starfinder 2 is the gap is, its own thing. So
Yes.
history can only go back about 300 years. So that's something you always have to kind of be prescient
Well, it
about.
can be pre-gap too,
That's
right?
true.
There's
It
some
can be
pre-gap
pre-gap.
stuff. But
You
yeah,
you
yeah,
can set things in the Pathfinder era. That's
yeah.
true. But that's difficult for me as like a literary history scholar,
Right.
where I'm like, oh right, there isn't like a medieval Starfinder. That's just Pathfinder, and then there's nothing there. So, but no, I think like setting wise, it's pretty easy for me to kind of separate the two. And I think part of that is just that Starfinder is kind of well built to do that.
Right.
The whole Galarian not being there, you don't have to worry as much about it. Also, I mean, I don't know, like, yeah, setting wise, I've never had much issue like separating the two. And I know that I like what items do more in Pathfinder 2, but
Hmm.
I mean that's not really saying much because I can write items in either system. Like,
Right. Well, I think the modifiers and bonuses are
yeah,
having striking and doing extra
mm-hmm.
damage and stuff like that. They the fusions in Starfinder, I think, are kind of boring. I mean, they do some cool things, but
Yeah.
that, you know, it doesn't seem as cool. I don't know. And some
Yeah,
it's bad.
I think it's what I mean, Pathfinder 2 you can make more interesting like custom weapons
Yeah.
that you can't really do in Starfinder, but also sometimes writing weapons in Starfinder is a bit easier because it's just like it's just the
Yeah.
same thing, only the damage scales. As opposed to like Pathfinder where you're like, all right, you have your one it's just one weapon.
Yeah.
That's it. it has to separate itself from the other weapons. But it's your one and then you keep attaching stuff to it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, they're both perfectly fine systems. And I've talked before, like, to some friends of mine about how, like, I like both equipment systems, but for
Mhm.
different reasons, because there's stuff that irritates me about both of them, but there's
Mhm.
stuff I really like about both, so.
Yeah, I'm primarily a Starfinder person as well. Most of my
Mm-hmm.
writing has been there, but I've been playing a lot more Pathfinder Second Edition,
Mm-hmm.
and especially low level. I just feel so limited in what I
Yeah.
can get. It's like I got all this money, I got nothing to spend it on. You know. So,
Yeah. For me, I find it depends on what like character I have. For
yeah.
whatever reason, my like Pathfinder Society inventor always feels poor. Like I have so many
Mhm.
things I need to buy and I don't
Right.
have
Right.
enough
Right.
money. But it's like my druid who's level 6. I'm like, cool, I have $500, nothing I need.
Yep. Yep.
So
Cool. So, what advice do you have for people interested in becoming a freelance author and game designer?
well, I mean, there's the standard bit of advice, which is always keep writing.
Yeah.
Always. um you know, whether you're writing like me for yourself, you're doing fiction, you're doing poetry, whatever, just always keep writing. Much like visual artists have to practice all the time, writers have to practice. You have to kind of hone your craft, more or less. Um, Other than that, I mean, a lot of people say start out in like third party stuff, which is probably good advice, but it's not advice I really know how to give people because I didn't really like start
Right.
there. But definitely keep an eye out for open calls. You know, follow companies that you're interested that you know are doing, you know, that you know hire freelancers. Follow them on their Twitter or, you know, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and keep an eye out on their if they have newsletters or whatever, for open calls. And hopefully, if you are writing all the time, like I said, you'll have some good samples of work to show people, which is kind of the big thing, you know. You only get, you know, 2 3 examples to show someone to show them whether or not you're really good enough to hire, and you know, make sure you got some good ones stacked up.
Yeah. So after you answered the first open call, how did you get your subsequent things? Did people just start recruiting you all the time, or did you have to do something
Well,
else?
so the first one, so I got my Secrets of Magic um, job, and then it was a, you know, a good few months, probably 7 or 8 months, um, until it was actually about the time I think Jenny Jarzabski was the
Hmm.
Starfinder developer at the time.
Right. Okay.
And it was around the time she was getting hired. I think shortly after I actually messaged her because we, you know, I followed her on Twitter. I occasionally, you know, made funny jokes at her stuff on Twitter. But I like messaged her on Twitter saying like, "Hey, if you have any Starfinder work, you know, let me know. I'd like to try writing an adventure." And she and I were, you know, talking, and we worked out a, you know, a time and a scenario. Well, and you know, she told me, sure, send me some samples. So I emailed her, I sent her a sample, I sent her my interest, and it actually helps to have like, you don't have to have super defined interests, but you know, it helps to be like, I don't necessarily think I'm ready to write X or Y and stuff like
Right.
that. You know, that stuff that's important to tell developers. And, you know, it also looks relatively professional and you kind of know your own limits. So I said, like, hey, you know, these are things that I'm good at. This is stuff that I study. Here are some samples of my work. And she eventually emailed me back saying, like, okay, I think I have a scenario. You know, let me give you the base information about it. Let me know how you feel about it. And you know, and it was a good time for her, because when you're, you know, somewhat new, you have, you know, your work has to be checked over or whatever. And so we found a scenario that worked, that I was interested in, and she sent me the outline and we got to working, and there you go. But it was not like a short process.
Right. Cool.
And I do think that, unfortunately, what does make some kind of new writers a little worried is that, you know, it can generally be a really long time after your first assignment before you get another one. So, but don't,
Right.
you know, don't give up hope.
Yes. I'm still hoping for scenarios. So I've been told some things, but I've been waiting still. So
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that. So what's next for Isis? What have you been working on that you can actually talk about?
Well, that's the real kicker, isn't it?
Yeah.
As freelance writers, there's only so much we can talk about. Well, there definitely will be things coming from me. I can say that much. There are things in the works, things that I've already done, not everything that I can talk about. Like I said, you know, keep an eye out for me in the world of scholarship. I'm trying to make you know, I'm trying to make an argument for tabletop RPGs
Yes.
in literary studies. So that's going to be a whole adventure in itself. Beyond that, I mean, I don't know. I have some things I'm working on, but I can't really talk about them yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not like working on any personal fiction right now, but that's also because grad school is taking up a good chunk of my time.
Right.
So to you know, to be determined on on more from me, I guess.
What about conventions? Will we see at any conventions coming up?
Maybe. See, the problem I have is I'm not like a big convention person. I went to like a bunch of conventions back when I was in high school, but for me, like, the conventions themselves are fine, but I'm just not a fan of all the travel and the packing and the going out and all that stuff. So I'll say it's possible, but I don't have any current plans.
Okay. Yeah, PaisaCon's a good one. That's one worth going. I mean, for you, it's probably a 2.5-hour flight.
Yeah, it's
coming
not
up,
far actually from me, and I know enough people that go that I could probably work out, like, you know, a good like hotel or whatever situation, but I just haven't gotten around to it, to be honest. So I mean, we'll see. Probably not 2023, but at some point I do need to go to a PaizoCon, and I have wanted to, because I know enough people who go to them.
Yeah.
It's possible I'll go to some like of the local cons around here next year. They didn't really work out for me this year, but my big thing is I don't have a car. And local conventions here, like, and I live in a very public transit good like a good public transit area, but the conventions kind of tend to be in areas that you need to drive to. So I didn't really get a good setup to go to them this year. So we'll see. I'll try next year.
All right. Well, maybe we'll see you at a convention sometime in the future.
Sometime in the future. I doubt I'll make it to Gen Con. That's a little far for me.
It is. It's a lot of fun, but it's a huge. If I were
Yeah.
picking a big convention to go to, I like Origins a lot more. It's a lot more
Mm,
personal, especially for the Paizo stuff. Gen
yeah.
Con's just massive. So it's just massive.
That sounds about right. I'll
Yeah.
definitely try to make it to a PaizoCon at some
Yeah.
point. Probably not like while I'm starting out grad school. So,
Right. For sure.
I mean, maybe 2024. Probably not 23. Especially now that I've just moved, I have to resort all my finances out. But you
Yes.
know,
No, for sure. For sure. Well, Isis, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been great.
yeah. Thanks for having me.